A legal triumph for another of TV's most beloved personalities. The woman who says she is Bill Cosby's daughter was found guilty of extortion by a federal jury. Autumn Jackson broke down in near hysterical sobs after she was convicted of trying to blackmail America's favorite television dad out of millions of dollars. Tonight, you will meet David Hinkle, one of the jurors who voted to convict Jackson and two co-defendants after more than 2 days of deliberations. And we'll hear from Gerald Jackson, the man who is listed on Autumn Jackson's birth certificate as her biological father and who believes he truly is her dad. Hi, everybody. I'm John Gibson, filling in for Geraldo Rivera. Later in the program, details on yet another big-time verdict that came down today. Vincent Chin Gigante found guilty of murder conspiracy and racketeering in one of the most important mob trials in U.S. history. But first, the Cosby case. David Hinkle is a NYNEX manager here in the New York area. Today, he voted to convict Autumn Jackson. David, any second thoughts a few hours later about the verdict?
Not at all.
None whatsoever?
None whatsoever.
Firm in your conviction?
100%.
All right. 10 years for her? That wouldn't bother you?
Didn't bother us.
Didn't bother you. All right. Well, we'll find out why. Before we continue this discussion with our experts and with the man who is on paper, at least, Autumn Jackson's father, let's get the details on today's developments from NBC's Pat Dawson.
The woman who claims to be Bill Cosby's daughter came to court today in a crush of cameras, still smiling, still hopeful. But a few hours later, she was reduced to near hysterical sobs when a jury found her guilty of extortion.
She's just devastated. She just kept on saying to me, how could they? How could they?
Jackson was convicted in the conspiracy with two co-defendants, but the verdict settled nothing about her relationship with Cosby. Jurors were instructed that legally, the issue of paternity had no bearing on the case.
She says that she is his daughter, but why should I believe a young woman who's trying to extort him for $40 million?
But the defense case hinged on convincing the jury of a special relationship between the comedian and Autumn Jackson, that she always believed he was her father. Jurors said it wouldn't have changed their minds if he was.
No child has the right to do this to their father.
On the stand, Cosby admitted having an affair with her mother, admitted giving them over $100,000 in support. But he also testified to a conversation where he once told her, "I'll be your father figure, but I'm not your father." And the government's case was formidable, including tapes of Ms. Jackson making blunt telephone threats to the star's sponsors and his network.
And how this will affect CBS if I go to any tabloids.
The message? Her story could ruin the reputation of one of America's favorite TV dads, one who'd built a well-tended image as a family man.
I swear, I fixed it. Come here.
The irony? By reporting the extortion threats to the FBI, Cosby all but guaranteed a very public airing of the embarrassing details he'd sought to keep quiet for 2 decades. Now Cosby must decide if he wants to see a girl he's shown real affection for in the past spend as long as 12 years in prison, raising the question, will he ask the court for leniency? For Bill Cosby, the trial may have been a mixed blessing, providing both a sense of vindication and a tough lesson in the delicate balance between private life and public image. Pat Dawson, NBC News, New York.
Our fine panel tonight includes Geraldo Rivera, a Denver-based criminal defense attorney. You remember her as one of Tim McVeigh's lawyers during the Oklahoma City bombing trial. Alongside Jerry is Bob Dunn, a civil and criminal litigator in New York City. In Los Angeles tonight, former prosecutor and retired Superior Court Judge Burton Katz, author of this new book, Justice Overruled. Well, we'll show it a little later, Bert. And this is Gerald Jackson, who, as you have heard, believes he, not Bill Cosby, is Autumn Jackson's real father, and he has the birth certificate to back him up. But first, let me turn first to David Hinkle, the member of the Cosby jury, who has joined us here tonight. David, one of the factors that we have heard may have been at work in this jury is that nearly everybody on the jury, or everybody, had some previous experience as jurors?
As far as I'm aware, I think everyone that I was talking to had previous experience on a jury.
Was there any discussion in that jury room about going out outside the four corners of the law, the definition of extortion, starting to consider things like paternity and what a father-daughter relationship ought to be and what her expectations might have been and whether or not she had a different culpability than the other two co-conspirators. Did you get into any of that?
No, not really.
Why not?
We wanted to stay within the bounds that Judge Jones charged us in the actual indictment. We wanted to stick to the law that she read to us. That was the first piece of evidence that we asked for in the jury room, was the charge that she read to us for an hour and a half, which was 50 pages long. We read through that repeatedly the first day, and we stuck to it for the 3 days of
Judge Katz, I know you're the judge and you always like to hear a juror who obeys the judge, but is this the kind of case where a glance outside the so-called four corners of the law would have been a responsible thing for the jurors to do?
No, I'm not certain it would have been responsible. I really respect this jury's verdict. They followed the law. Clearly, you don't have a right to rape your mother. You don't have a right to murder your father, and you don't have a right to extort money from your father. And the lesson is very clear. And they followed the law right down the line. And I think where the real fight, of course, is going to be in sentencing. And I know you're going to want to discuss that later.
We are going to discuss that. I'm going to go to Bob Dunn first. Bob, David's sitting one person away from you. How would you have reached over and said, look at the things you didn't consider?
I think, and you don't want to criticize counsel with hindsight, but I think it would have been important to have Autumn testify herself. I think it would be important for the jury to understand what was her state of mind and what it was that she was doing. Now, David said they didn't even consider those kinds of factors because they stuck within the letter of the law. Well, one of the elements that he was charged to find was that she was intending to extort money from Bill Cosby as opposed to intending to either sell her own rights or to recoup what she believed to be hers by virtue of a birthright or whatever. So I think that some consideration should have been had with regard to those issues, because those did stick within the four quarters of the law with regard to her intent.
Geraldo Rivera is, among other things, Bert, I know you'll be glad to know, an expert on sentencing guidelines. The federal judge here is going to get a probation report and then apply the sentencing guidelines to Autumn Jackson's case. So can you give us any insight on what she's really facing? A dozen years has been thrown around on the wire services. Is that real?
No, that's not real. I think a dozen years is the possible maximum penalty she could receive in terms of what each statute carries. However, there's sentencing guidelines, and I think she was convicted of two offenses that carry 5 years, the extortion and conspiracy to commit extortion, and then also a crossing state lines for which the maximum is 2. Now, you can't get double sentenced on the conspiracy to commit extortion and extortion, so that's really a total maximum of 5, with some exceptions for possible grouping or strictly legal rules, which I don't want to get into. And then I really have a hard time believing this judge would run the 2-year term consecutive to the 5-year. So I think really she's looking at probably a maximum of 5. And he could depart downward, and I personally hope he would.
Well, Jerry, don't you think that Bill Cosby, now that he's made the object lesson, he's protected himself and his rights, now we'll go in on a victim impact statement and say, look, she's done wrong, she needs to be punished, but she doesn't need to go to prison, she needs some therapy,
Bert,
she needs some help.
doesn't that raise the question of why didn't he do that before?
No, it doesn't.
There could have been a deferred prosecution.
Because of crime.
You know.
No, because there was a crime. Because there was a crime that was committed. He had to stop it. He had literally been paying blackmail for all these years, $100,000.
Would you send your daughter to prison on this kind of deal, Bert?
No, I would not. But here's what I would do. Under the circumstances that she was threatening to go to everyone, destroy his reputation. It's built on the familial love and being a great father, so that his career was potentially almost destroyed as a result of this. But now the object.
He could have done the right thing to begin with. He could have just given this woman some closure. All she wanted to know was who her father was and what her roots are.
No, that's not true.
If he had just taken the paternity test, even though he wasn't legally responsible
Jerry,
he could have answered that question for her, and this case never would have gotten to court to begin with.
You know what? Here's a woman who says she's 21 years old now, and she wants a $1.5 million house, which she's already secured the offer on. Dad, I want you to send a check now. I negotiated this. I want $40 million. Well, it went down to $30 million, with 24 going to her and 6 to Medina. I mean, this is clearly something outrageous. If she would have been asked to say,
it's just Publishers Clearinghouse,
yeah,
Bert.
If she would have said, say, hey, give me $20,000, I'll have closure, or $30,000, or even $100,000,
Gerald Jackson is listed on the birth certificate as the real father. Mr. Jackson, How do you feel about your daughter going away for what Jerry tells us is likely to be somewhere in the range of 5 years in the federal pen for this crime?
Well, to tell you the truth, I feel very bad for Autumn, but I always kind of thought that this was going to happen.
Why?
And, well, actually, she had everything stacked against her from the very beginning. And I tried my best to really get her from the very beginning to back out of it and just really show some
Did you know
remorse
anything
here.
about it while she was in this so-called negotiation period?
Know anything about what?
That she was making demands of Bill Cosby and his lawyers?
No, I didn't know anything about it until it hit the news, just like it hit the news.
So when did you try to get her to back out of it, then, if you didn't know anything about it until after it hit the news?
After it hit the news, I put out articles myself with the Associated
But it already happened by that time.
Pardon me?
It had already happened. You said you tried to do everything you could to get her to back out of it, but at the point in time that you're saying you even became aware of it, she was already arrested.
What I mean by back out of it, when she was arrested, I tried to get her to more or less say, hey, I made a mistake, I screwed up here, and you know, I'm sorry. All right?
Oh, to cop out, yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted her to do. I wanted her to show some remorse. I wanted her to accept the things that she had done.
Gerald Jackson, we got to go to a break. Let me ask you real quickly on our way out. You believe you are her father?
I am her father.
You don't believe that Bill Cosby is her father?
He's not her father.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Autumn's Fall. You're watching Rivera Live on CNBC.
I think clearly Autumn will suffer greatly as a result of this. If Mr. Cosby is Autumn's father, I can't imagine that a father would feel good seeing his daughter go to jail.